با سلام و عرض خوش آمد به همه حضار محترم. امروز اولین رویداد جانبی ارگان غیردولتی سودویند در مقر سازمان ملل در ارتباط با بازداشت‌های خودسرانه و بردهداری نوین در جمهوری اسلامی ایران هست. اولین سخنران ما خانم دیان علایی، نماینده جامعه جهانی بهایی در سازمان ملل هستند. ایشون صحبت خودشون رو در ارتباط با بازداشت‌های خودسرانه بهاییان در ایران شروع می‌کنند.
Thank you very much, and thank you for Südwind for organizing this meeting. It's always a pleasure to participate and an honor to be able to speak about the situation of the Baha'is. Today we're talking about arbitrary detention. And unfortunately, arbitrary detention for the Baha'is in Iran is not a case that is just punctual and once in a while. All the arrests of Baha'is in Iran and all the detentions of the Baha'is in Iran are arbitrary. Since 2005, there has been over 820 arrests of Baha'is in the Islamic Republic of Iran. And to date, there are 74 Baha'is who are in prison. And the reason for the arrests and the detentions of these Baha'is is simply because of their religious belief. They have not committed any crime, and they are just arrested under false charges that I will talk about, but they're basically arrested because either they're a member of the Baha'i community, they have served their Baha'i community, for example, the 7 former leaders of the Baha'i community who are managing the affairs of the community have been arrested, and they're actually considered by the working group on arbitrary detention as cases of arbitrary detention. And you can find their case in the archives of the working group on arbitrary detention. Other Baha'is have been and are detained for collaboration with the Baha'i Institute of Higher Education, which basically means that they were trying to help provide Baha'i youth who are denied access to universities an alternative form of having access to superior studies. And it's only for that reason that they have been imprisoned. Other Baha'is have been imprisoned and are arbitrarily detained for holding Baha'i meetings, holding prayer meetings, or providing for the spiritual and moral education of children or junior youth group. Of course, the charges against these Baha'is are not necessarily directly mentioned as being Baha'is, although there are. Some of the Baha'is who have been detained only on charges of belonging to the Baha'i faith or belonging to the illegal group of the Baha'i faith, if not worse wording is used for qualifying the simple fact of holding the belief in the Baha'i faith. But the other charges can be, for example, acting against national security. It's quite a strong charge, acting against national security. And it is very strange that Baha'is be accused of such an act, because in fact the purpose of the reason why many of the Baha'is have stayed in Iran, and the reason why they want to stay in Iran, is because they consider themselves Iranians like everybody else, and that's very normal, and that because they want to serve the community around them and their country. And so the whole purpose of trying to do acts of service, which they are engaged in, is actually to promote the well-being of their country, of their fellow countrymen, and of their nation. And so it's very ironical that in fact one of the charges against them be acting against national security. Another of the accusations that are leveled against them is insulting religious sanctities, which is again quite strange because in fact Baha'is, as a tenet of their faith, believe in Islam, respect Prophet Muhammad, and think that the Quran is a divinely revealed book. So it would be extremely strange to see any Baha'i actually insult religious sanctities, and particularly Islamic religious sanctities. Of course, Baha'is also believe the same for Christ and for Moses and for other messengers of God. But in the context of Iran, it is mainly, of course, Islam. Then another of the common allegations or accusations against the Baha'is is spying for foreign countries, and particularly spying for Israel. I think spying for foreign countries is qualified by the Iranian government in doing exactly what we're doing today, which is reporting about the human rights violations that take place in Iran to the international fora. And so therefore, or providing various governments about information about the human rights situation in Iran. Of course, the Baha'is in Iran provide about themselves. So it's not even talking about some other people, but just about their own situation. And that is considered spying for foreigners. And you very well know, but I think it's worthwhile repeating, that the accusation of spying for Israel is completely, has no base, because it is true that the Baha'i holy places today are in Israel, and that the Baha'i World Center is today in Israel, but it's because Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, was exiled by two Muslim rulers, the Qajars and the Ottoman Empire, to the city of Akka, Acre, in what was then Palestine, under the Ottoman Empire. And he died there, and he's buried there, and he died there in 1892. So way before there was any thinking or idea, let alone creation of the State of Israel. And the government of Iran knows that very well. But of course they're using it in order to find excuses for the arbitrary detention of the Baha'is. Finally, one of the also very ironical accusations that was leveled against some Baha'is, a few of them, but I thought it was worthwhile to mention, is obtaining false degrees and using them. So you know, Baha'is who are denied access to education in Iran, young Baha'is, they study through what is called the Baha'i Institute of Higher Education, which is an ad hoc, very grassroots way of allowing these young people to study and obtain degrees. Of course, these degree they get is not recognized by the Iranian government, and so therefore, in order to obtain a degree that would be then valid, they go abroad, generally to do a master's degree or a PhD degree in foreign universities. And after having obtained this degree, this master's degree or this PhD degree, they come back to Iran again in order to be able to use a profession. And so the Iranian government has used these degrees, which are Western degrees that they accept in all other cases for all other non-Baha'i students who would go abroad and study and then come back with a master's degree of a PhD. They say that these degrees are fake because the original degree came from the Baha'i Institute of Higher Education. So the Iranian government does not even recognize, in the case of Baha'is, degrees that are duly very well obtained in foreign universities. The arrests, of course, are also quite violating human rights procedures when Baha'is are arrested. And most of the time, the people who come and come to their door to arrest them try to come to their homes with using false identities. So they ring the doorbell and they say that it's the plumber or it's somebody else or it's a neighbor in order to enter. And when they enter the homes, of course, they very often don't have a warrant. And if they have a warrant, or what is supposedly a warrant, they show a piece of paper that is completely illegible. So you don't know whether it's a warrant, and you don't even know who has ordered your arrest, and it's not clear who has signed this warrant. These arrests are often very violent. The men who come are armed, sometimes masked. They are extremely violent, often very impolite. They frighten the children. They threaten the spouse. They even threaten the elderly parents if they also work in their homes. I mean, if they live, in the home of these Baha'is who are arrested. And not only do they arrest the individual, but of course they ransack the house and they confiscate books, laptops, photos, and even Baha'i photos. So if their arrest is not based on the religious belief of a Baha'i, then why would they be confiscating Baha'i photos? Now, what I'm going to say here about these arrests and this arbitrary detention is actually not only applicable to Baha'is. And I'm sure that if some of my colleagues will now also speak on some of other arrests, arbitrary detention, the conditions are exactly the same for all the prisoners of conscience, or most of the prisoners of conscience who are arrested in Iran. Because when people are arrested, they're very, very often taken to unknown locations and not taken directly to a prison. Or if they are taken to a prison, they themselves do not realize and are not told that it's a prison. And the family, for periods of time that can go from days to weeks, do not know where the person who has been arrested is held. And this unknown location is sometimes, most of the time, also combined with abusive solitary confinement. And you know that the Special Rapporteur on Torture has said that extensive solitary confinement is equivalent to torture. And this is what Baha'is are subjected to. Finally, to go through this whole process of really completely illegal and violating all human rights norms of arbitrary detention of Baha'is, I wanted to refer finally to the time that they're detained. And they do not also, they're not even have the same rights as other prisoners. They very oftentimes are denied furlough. And if they are given furlough, then the amount of the bail that is required is so high that it actually can be equivalent to a form of financial extortion. Because people, it's not a normal amount of money, and people oftentimes have to give deeds of properties or sell their car or all sorts of other things, or give their business licenses in order for a furlough, in order to be released from prison. The Islamic Republic of Iran has adopted last year a new penal code. And that penal code actually gives provisions for a reduction of the imprisonment if there are double or triple sentences. So, for example, if you're condemned on 2 accusations, 1, 2, which is the case of the Baha'i leaders, for example, they're condemned to 10 years imprisonment for the charges that are actually stated above, and then they have another 10 years imprisonment because of their acting against God. And so the new penal code says that if you have 2 charges, then the highest one is applicable. So in the case of the Baha'i leaders, though instead of being imprisoned for 20 years, they should be imprisoned of 10 years because they have two sentences of 10 years. But when they request that, when their lawyer requested that, they were told that this is not applicable to them. So this is a twist in the law. And again, another provision in the penal code is that when you have served, sometimes it's 1/3, but oftentimes it's 2/3 of your sentence, then you can be released on conditional release. But again, when Baha'is have applied for that conditional release, they have been told that this is not applicable to them. And I just wanted to end, give you actually an example that I just received this morning of a case that is so blatant of this lack of application of even Iran's law to the Baha'is. In one city, and I'll keep everything anonymous for the safety of that person who is still in prison. But a judge visited a prison in one town in Iran and spoke with the prisoners. So a Baha'i told him that this person and 5 others were incarcerated because of the charges related to their belief in the Baha'i faith. And the Baha'i said that when he or she became eligible for conditional release, they made a request in writing, but they were told that the Ministry of Intelligence, the Secret Service, have rejected the request. So this person asked the judge to which authority he or she could be writing, for this conditional release. And the judge told that person that that person is neither eligible for conditional release nor for leave of absence because the public prosecutor is against it. And so the Baha'i asked to what provincial or national authority should he or she write to get the matter investigated, and the judge responded, whoever you will write to, it will bounce and will come back to be placed in your case file. So the Baha'i asked, so what should we do? We have nowhere to turn. No one responds to us. And the judge says, you have said yourself that you have nowhere to turn to. You should just quietly finish your sentence, and that's all it is. So this is the reality of the so-called Islamic justice for Baha'is in Iran. Thank you very much.